Hi everyone, welcome to the Digital Supply Chain Podcast. My name is Tom Raftery, and with me on the show today, I have my special guest, Hristo. Hristo, welcome to the podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, Tom, for the invitation. My name is Hristo Hadjitchonev, and I'm an expert of a lot of things. I have been software developer, engineer, three times entrepreneur. So right now it's called serial entrepreneur, things like that. But so I have my graduation in maths, or more especially the maths behind the AI, way beyond, before this term to be invented, let's say, or to became a buzzword around. And I have a lot of experience implementing such things dating back into year 2000, really.
Okay, and what are you doing now?
So right now I was invited and I'm helping a company called Transmetrics, which is in logistics sector. First, initially came here and helped them to speed up and to boost their forecasting and AI platform to meet the customer demands, in particular in logistics, and currently going further after that successful transformation. I'm helping the company to introduce the brand new version of their core product, NetMetrics version. I'm working on NetMetrics version 2, generally as a project manager and generator driver and setting the scope of all that.
Okay. Obviously, since the launch of ChatGPT last year, AI has become the hot new thing. As we mentioned before we turned on the recorders, suddenly everyone's an expert in AI. So you are actually an expert in AI. You've been at it close to 25 years now, or maybe even longer. What are you seeing that are kind of the best use cases for AI in supply chain right now?
Supply chain is, let's say, it's a very huge domain. So you could take a look at the supply chain, like the companies that are in fast-moving consumer goods. It's retailers which are purely digitalized retailers, and etc. etc. So logistics around all that as well is included. So you have a quite different perspectives around that. I will start with a very, very simple thing, which is a little bit more like fundamental, more philosophical, let's say. And I will say, what is a prediction? And let's start from there. Let's say like that. People do not recognize, but actually, probably 99% of the things they are doing on daily basis, everything is actually a form of prediction. If you start looking how the kids start developing, knowing what is the world, they start doing some tries. As an example, they have a cube and they try to put that cube in a particular place, and they figure out that the cube actually fit or do not fit. And after that, they have already that knowledge, and they know they do prediction. When they took an object, they could predict where that object could fit. And going even to things like when you go to the work every morning, before we to have Google Maps, actually, everybody was trying to predict which will be the best way, best routing, okay, based on experience. Here is a traffic jam, here is not, etc., etc. And I will say to the level of right now, you're asking me things, but you have some form of prediction that probably I'll give you some valuable information around that. So
I'm hoping so.
Yeah. So to my understanding, and it's a little bit philosophical, actually everything is a form of prediction. And everything is a form of prediction based on information we have from the past. Without matter is going to be done by a human or by some other instrument or AI or whatever. But somehow the concept is that you learn from your past based on the information you gather and experience that you have. And after that, you manage to forecast this information with some cases what if for the future. And if I'm exiting from this purely philosophical thing, I would say that any business that is probably the most and core part of the successful business. So either it's prediction which product is going to fit to the client needs, either if you have your product is the prediction what is the number. So generally that's a qualitative prediction, and the quantitative prediction is what amount of number of product you need for next week, next month, whatever. to satisfy the current demand. All this is form of prediction. So if we turn back in the past, it's generally the same. I mean, even if you go into the Mediterranean Sea, into the 2000 years back and things like that, they start predicting, okay, they're moving goods around where probably they have a demand. Nobody will just put some wine in Greece, moving that to Spain or to Germany without knowing that there is a market for that, which again is form of prediction.
Sure.
So supply demand chain is a very sophisticated thing of the modern world to do everything to give access to all the people around the globe to what they need. I would generalize like that. This fits everything again fits to these terms. I mean, you have to predict what your client needs and in what quantities, when, where. Simple questions, actually. And what's interesting is that you have, again, returning back, you have retailers. I mean, supply demand chain, but in supply demand chain, from one perspective, as an example, we have retailers. From another perspective, you have the logistic companies that are operating in that space and serving to the needs of the retailers. But even the retailers there could be very different. As an example, fast-moving consumer goods, more traditional fast-moving consumer goods, they have locations, they operate with stores. Probably if they're big, they have warehouses and they have a huge, complicated supply-demand chain, including thousands of suppliers, serving to probably millions of customers in some cases. I mean, when I'm talking about big clients like Tesco, like Reve, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. On the other spectrum, even from size perspective, you have just a local store, which again is having the same need. I mean, they need to know what they have to satisfy the customer need. I work for one of the biggest platforms here in the Balkans about that. And they have a warehouse just because they supply about 15,000 SKUs. That means from diapers to vegetables to beer, meat, fresh everything. So they generally compete against your local store or any store, but purely they have pure logistics with them, and they have huge warehouse. So for them, the prediction what to have in their warehouse is crucial, because operating with 15,000 SKUs, you have something like a lot of them are short shelf time SKUs, like fresh meat, as an example. It's 2 to 3 days. You have to be very precise into the prediction about that, because otherwise you're going to waste, or otherwise you're not going to have enough meat for your clients. And the local store is optimizing generally the same, but not virtually, having the warehouse there. And all this has logistics around. So electronic shops and any digital form of the shops right now has a massive impact on the logistics, because especially after the COVID crisis. And the logistics has a little bit of a different meaning. So let's make the comparison between what is, as an example, what factors are important for fast-moving consumer goods, and to compare it with logistics. So for fast-moving consumer goods, obvious things are weather, customer patterns, and weather in terms of atmospheric weather. I'm not meaning anything else. Seasons, a lot of seasonalities, but as well you have impact from special days. Like, as an example, here in the Balkans, we have a celebration around some of our, as an example, Easter. There is a huge increase of consuming lamb. And this is really for few days. I mean, and when I said huge, that means up to 1,000% in changes of behavior for just 2-3 days. So you have to, I mean, they know, but you have to still keeping the trends. And if you multiply that across many SKUs, that became a very complex structure of trying to know what is going to be next day, next week, and etc. And this is pretty the same with logistics. Because the logistic, again, the weather factor affects, I mean, especially seasonality. And in logistics, you have, because currently we are seeing a huge trend in logistics, there is huge increase. It's almost more than half of the transportation actually is coming from any form of electronic trade. Generally, people that are going to e-shops, They are buying, and somebody has to deliver.
Yeah.
So if we compare what is the challenge about the retailers and the logistic companies, and the difference with them is the fact that logistic companies, they operate with huge amount of goods that are delivered because of retailers. That was generally not exactly into the past. I mean, into the past, the people were exchanging things, and of course, companies, business to business, were exchanging things. But right now, it's a massive boom of business to consumer deliveries based on the sales that was purely in internet. And this massively increased after the COVID. I mean, the trend before that was huge, but right now, I mean, 50 to 60% of the packages that are transported actually are generated from that. And this changed a little bit the structure for the logistic, because they start having things like, I mean, huge changes into the transportation needs around special days. A good example is Black Friday. I mean, and you know that Black Friday is not just a Friday, it could continue. I mean, the lasting effect is about a month.
Wow.
And another good example is Christmas as well.
Yeah.
I mean, all days the people were going to the shop to find a present for their relatives and things like that. And right now, okay, probably they're browsing there, but majority of them, they're getting deals from online, and after that, it should be delivered.
Yeah.
And so, let's say the similarities are, as I said, again, you have impact from seasons, you have impact from special days, and etc., etc. But what is the difference? And here I want to open a little bit of a bracket and to explain that prediction is just part of the equation. Because after that, any system has something called decisioning. So, as an example, you could predict something, but that doesn't mean that you apply your prediction in the real life. So generally, you predict that, as an example, tomorrow there will be a thunderstorm, but the decisioning is, okay, the chance of that thunderstorm is about, let's say, 30%, and my decisioning is, do I'm going to get an umbrella? Or I would say, I don't want to have an umbrella for all day, because 30% is, okay, relatively, I'm not scared. I would be discomfort to have an umbrella with me. But if the probability is not 30, but 80%, probably I'll get the umbrella. Let's transform that in retail sense. In retail sense, is a very good example is the packaging. So let's just imagine that we have a crystal ball.
Okay.
So prediction is absolutely correct, 100%. You still have a huge issue with the decisioning, because let's take as an example of something which is has a short shelf time.
Okay.
As a fresh milk, not condensed, not packaged, but fresh milk. That means 3 days, let's say that.
Yeah.
Still, the fresh milk is delivered in packages. So you buy a package of fresh milk that has, as an example, 20 bottles of 1 liter. And if your prediction, which is absolutely correct, predicts 27, you have to decide what to do. To order in your store 1 package of 20 bottles, meaning 7 bottles shortage, or to order 2 packages of 20 bottles, 40, meaning that you meet the demand, but after that you have something that might be wasted. And this is a tiny balance of the decisioning, which actually has even bigger impact on the systems when you apply such kind of systems in your supply demand chain compared to the accuracy of the prediction. Based on my entire experience, all the managers which are initially tried, which for the very first time when they apply and they try to use such kind of techniques, data science techniques, artificial intelligence, etc., they really focus about the precision of the prediction. And my experience is showing that actually the 80% of the quality of the decision is much bigger compared to the 20% how precise you are in the prediction. Because, as I said, I mean, into the case with 20 versus 40, this is 50% changes. Let's say if your prediction is 5% correct, you still operate into decisioning with something that might create a 50% change into your decision, which generally means that this 5% is irrelevant, small change, an accuracy you could create into the decision. But for retailers, this is quite easy, that perspective. Because for the retailers, it's the KPIs that they follow could be defined very easily and very straightforward, which means that you might have waste or you might have lost opportunities, and you try to balance between these two. Again, of course, this is simplified. You might have how big is your warehouse and things like that. I'm pretty in the business, but I don't want to get into such more details right now during that because we will not have time. But generally, the decisioning is a little bit simpler. Into the difference with logistics, where the demand is much more simpler because not a lot of factors are affecting the demand. As an example, in retail, you might have things like color trends. Let's take a very good example I have experience with apparel business as well.
Okay.
Right now, the movie Barbie will completely change for a few months, probably even a year. The amount of the pink dresses that the people will look, and I'm already seeing that. It's going to be a fact, and this is a change that is going to happen. So you don't have such thing into the retail, let's say like that. I mean, you have your office where some people are going to drop packages, or you have your contract with some retailer that will give you packages, but you have not to predict what will be the effect of the movie Barbie across your sales of clothes if you're a retailer in the apparel business. But the difference, as I said, I mean, so the forecasting part is simpler into the retail, into the logistic business compared to the retail, where the factors could be even hundreds. In logistics are much less, but the decisioning is much more complex afterwards because, as I said, the optimization into the retail after that, the decisioning is really to the 2-3 key KPI components. Rather, after that, you have a very, very complex structure of decisioning. Generally, the decisioning means if I get a particular amount of packages and I have to distribute these packages across my network and they to reach our client into some form of SLAs, could be 24 hours delivery or 48 hours delivery, etc. Actually, any even small logistic company actually has a very, very complex network and very complex processes that are handling just this single package to move across. And a lot of decisions with which truck is to be loaded, what to be the distribution center, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the combination here could vary to millions of possible decisions of the task how to transport just a single package from one place to another, which really complicate the decisioning part. And this is the huge difference. I mean, the huge difference between the logistics part of the supply demand management and purely about what I need, what kind of product, et cetera, which is more very on the retail side of the supply demand management.
Okay, and what is the uptake like of AI solutions in retail versus logistics, or retail and logistics?
So AI serves to the need in a similar way, even from a little bit of a different perspective. I would say the following. I mean, if we compare in retail as an example, if we compare a small local store, a good example. Generally, this is a meat store. Let's take as an example meat store. So probably the seller there, who is probably even the owner, operates with few SKUs, 10 SKUs, 20 SKUs. I mean, few types of fresh meat and probably some sort of assortment of salami and things like that, and that's all. And probably he knows his client personally by the name. Probably they are their local neighbors and they know each other perfectly. He's part of the community, and generally the prediction that he has to have a prediction. But let's say he form a business where if somebody is missing his piece of meat today, that's not a big deal, or things like that. If you take the perspective of a huge chain where you deal with thousands of SKUs, and hundreds of locations, only multiplying the decisioning between these two. I mean, they operate with 15 to 30,000 SKUs and hundreds to thousands of locations. So that immediately means that for every single day, they're taking millions and millions of decisions to optimize what is on the shelves, what is in their warehouses. And I would say that with respect to the people, with respect to the humans, the amount of the decisions is so huge that AI, I would say currently, with the opportunity that AI is giving to the world, is that any retailer that wants to have efficient decisions, and this is probably the key, AI helps you to take really efficient decisions based on history and to help the people to be much, much more efficient. So that's the very fundamental, for me at least, as working on that field, key difference between pure human decisions and AI. I would say that if we have to compare what is going right now with the people that are more afraid about that technology or more reluctant or have some doubts about is it working or not, I would say that it's not a question to be man versus machine. It's a question about man versus man with a machine. I would say AI, in a way, is going to change our world, but in a good way. I mean, it's going to help us to become more efficient. By the way, I'll give you an example. I work for a pastry shop chain, and we've managed to optimize their waste really from 7% to around 1%. 6% of waste, you cannot imagine how many tons of cakes thrown are on yearly basis.
Yeah.
It's only from that perspective, we have to start thinking that might be, it's not the only solution, but in using techniques like that will help to our environment as well. Logistic is a good example. Logistic, when I explained that the transportation, the decisioning part is the harder part, AI actually is helping a lot to the companies to become efficient, which is okay. They became efficient. They will make more a profit out of that, and etc. Or they will have more profit to invest, etc. Because I mean, profit is not a bad thing. Could be used in various ways, but they bought a part with that all the efficiency actually reduce the carbon footprint that any logistic company is producing. And let's say like that, what I prefer to have a very polluted environment, not using AI, if AI is even helping me to have a much more, let's say not much, but more cleaner environment. Definitely I will go for more cleaner environment.
Sure. If organizations are interested in starting data science or AI projects internally, to try and become more efficient or to make their local environment cleaner, to your point, what are good first steps?
Okay, so there are two aspects of that. Any AI data science project is based on data. So probably the very, very first step is that the companies has to start collecting data and storing their data. I've met such an examples, and this is not a rare example. This is quite often example when I ask, okay, how long is your history down? And they say, it's wasting a little bit of more this space here, and we're keeping 1 year. And I say, but see, guys, this is one of the more precious things that you have, by the way, your history of how the world impacted you and what's changed with you, etc.
Yeah.
How did you? I mean, the cost of this storage is zero. I mean, it's nothing compared to the cost of the information that you have into that data. Probably that's the very first thing. I'm seeing less and less things like that, but in my experience, I had some few dramatic changes like that. I mean, we decided to start just a little bit about the financials because of things like that, etc. Why? You have to store everything. That's probably the very first thing. So the data is good, but after that, you have to find what to do with that. So a good formulated need is not often could come only from the business. And in that case, I will say that into the field, there are a lot of experts already to use an expertise as a consultancy to help you forming the idea of the transformation, not necessarily to do the transformation itself, could be very good. Of course, you could hire a person with experience. But this really depends on the size of the company you operate and etc. And I would say that already even the medium and the small business has opportunities. And of course, for them, they have to look for solutions that are within the space they operate, because probably this case is repeatable and they might find a solution that is already working for their, let's say, more in terms of scope, more smaller context. And okay, let's assume we have the data and we have already oriented the goal. And here we have three opportunities, and they have cost and benefits in general. So the very first opportunity is you to build an expertise in your organization. Especially the big organizations are almost always saying, we're going to build an expertise in our organization. And I would say that that's the most expensive approach.
Sure.
Because having a team of experts into the field is one of the most costly things that you might have into your IT organization. I mean, data science and generally the people that are in AI field are one of the most well paid.
They're highly sought after.
Yeah, nowadays, and this is going to be, let's say, a costly exercise. And it's not only about the numbers. So the good thing is that you keep the knowledge inside. You build the knowledge, especially around your organization and your needs. And here again, it became the bad thing. And this again, based on my experience. The data science is based on mathematics. That's it. I mean, from ground zero, everything is mathematics. And the reality is that there is no answer, is a valid answer in mathematics. Which means that you might invest in your personal team, spend a fortune to find out the answer, there is no answer. And generally, at that moment, the business became absolutely frustrated. And they became, this is the next buzzword, don't bother me, this is wrong, we have not to utilize that, etc. So if you're not really ready for investments with errors, with, let's say, big expenses, which, this is not an error, as I said, it's just you discover one fact. That's it, dear mathematics. You might start looking for already existing solutions. So the already existing solution has the benefit that especially solutions which are delivered as a SaaS, they have several benefits. So the very first benefit is that they do not meet only you as a customer, but a lot of other customers, which means that you have already quality product. And having a quality product, you might have the restriction because the knowledge is not on your side. You might have the restriction that, you're not exactly building the knowledge about that, but you have the huge benefit that taking that as a ready solution, even it has some constraints, it's not satisfying 100% exactly your needs, it's going to fit to work, to what exactly is promised. So, and probably that's one of the best approaches, I would say, if you decide to go as a first step. Use external expertise, use already proven solution, and experiment in a small scale or medium scale in your organization. And if the experiment is successful, sit with the numbers and start thinking, okay, it turned out that it's working for me. And I have a benefit, I have enough return investment into that. right now, what do I'm going to continue in that route? So utilizing more and more services into the area or ready products, or I to start building my own team. This is really at that moment depends on the current decision.
Sure. Hristo, we're coming towards the end of the podcast now. Is there any question I haven't asked that you wish I had, or any aspect of this we haven't touched on that you think it's important for people to be aware of?
Probably I will say the following. It's not about something you didn't ask. I will just probably try to transmit the message as one of, let's say, not exactly pioneer, but for quite a while into that industry. I'm seeing right now the transformation, and I'm seeing that this transformation is going to go further more and more. I would say to the people, do not afraid to take that change. Let's say, I will even use the bigger word, to embrace that change. It's going to help. I mean, that change is for good. If anybody imagines Terminator or things like that, don't afraid, it's not going to be like that. It's not going to happen like that. Or let's say, or at least in very close future. I mean, not very close future, future next few centuries.
Yeah.
Back in the days, the people were ruining machines because they were thinking that they're taking their jobs. The fact is that we're prospering because of that. Either at the moment when you're part of the change, that scares you, and any change is very something hard thing. Probably that's the only message that I would say. Do not afraid to take change. By the way, finally, I will tell you the following. My wife is a university professor. And in university right now, they have a huge problem with ChatGPT because ChatGPT is used to, as an example, write thesis and things like that.
Sure.
The question is quite interesting. Is it right or wrong? So generally, the question is, you gave an ice cream to your kid, and you're saying to your kid, so there is an ice cream here in front of you, but it's forbidden you to eat it. So I would say we have to find a way, because this technology is going to be a part of our society going further.
Yeah.
So yes, it's not very clear how we're going to right now to accommodate in a perfect way, but the kid sitting in front of the ice cream is not a good as well.
Sure.
Message.
I was on another podcast with a university professor, 7-8 months ago. So just when ChatGPT was taking off, and she was talking about similar kind of issues in the university. And she was saying her university was thinking of forbidding the use of ChatGPT. And what I said to her was, actually, you should require its use. Because if you require its use, then you've set a level playing field. Everyone will use it. And the people who use it best will get the best results. And that's a good thing, because they will have learned how properly to use the tool. And so that, I think, is probably the way universities should consider approaching this. Anyway, we're at the end of the podcast, Hristo. If people
by the way, just one final remark, because it's really interesting. It happened yesterday. My son is 16 years old.
Okay.
And went without me to Oppenheimer movie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So what happened after that? He was really impressed. I mean, he came to me and said, "Oh, Father, I know that you really like history, and you, especially Second World War, you're quite aware about that. You still didn't look the movie. Go look at it after that. I want to discuss with you." And I said, "Hey, about what?" And he said, "Yes, I used ChatGPT after that to make a research." And I would say that in that case, and he was really impressed about, I mean, we start thinking about the nuclear war, what actually nuclear nukes are, things like that. Is it good for the society? But he started developing an idea to use nukes to lift, instead of SpaceX, to lift ships into the cosmos, into the space. I explained to him that actually this idea there is an idea about that, but moving ships across the space, not lifting them from the Earth and things like that. But I will say immediately that if the ChatGPT was not there, he was not going to be able to crunch, as an example, using Google so fast for half a day, all that information to start this conversation with me.
Yeah.
And yeah, I hope you get the message.
No, it's hugely impressive what it can do. It really, really is. Anyhow, as I said, we're at the end of the podcast, Hristo. If people would like to know more about yourself or any of the things we discussed in the podcast today, where would you have me direct them?
So I'm going to send you the link of my LinkedIn, and they could follow. I have in few of the companies I'm having some blogs and etc. So please welcome to everybody to get a little bit more from what I'm sharing to the public.
Fantastic. Hristo, that's been great. Thanks a million for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and wish you very best as well, and to all your audience.